The cold came down hard that February, the kind that made breath hang in the air like fog and turned sidewalks into glass. It was the sort of night where most people rushed from car to door without looking up, collars turned high, eyes narrowed against the wind. But something made him slow down. Something small. Something that didn't belong. At first it looked like a bundle of fabric caught against the base of the street lamp, maybe a scarf or a grocery bag blown loose from someone's trash. But as his headlight swept across it, the shape shifted. Just barely. A tremor. A curl of something pale against dark fur. He pulled over, engine still running, and stepped out into the bite of the wind. It wasn't a scarf. It was a kitten. Or at least that's what his mind told him in the first stunned second. But as he crouched down, gloves off now despite the cold, he saw the truth written in the delicate architecture of its face, the tufted ears, the oversized paws, the faint rosettes patterning a coat that was too thick, too wild. This wasn't a house cat. This was a bobcat. A baby. And it was dying. He didn't think. He just moved. Scooping the limp body into his arms, he felt how light it was, how wrong that felt. Its fur was stiff with ice. Its breathing was so shallow he had to press his ear to its chest to hear the faint flutter of a heartbeat beneath fragile ribs. He wrapped it inside his coat, tucking it against his body, and ran back to the car. The heater roared to life. The wipers scraped frost from the windshield, and he drove home through streets empty and white, one hand on the wheel, the other cradling something that shouldn't have survived this long. Inside, the house was warm. Too warm, maybe, but he didn't care. He laid the bobcat on a towel in the bathroom, under the glow of a heat lamp he'd once used for a rescued sparrow. Heating pads, more towels, a shallow dish of water he knew it probably couldn't drink yet. He worked quietly, methodically, the way you do when panic would only make things worse. Its eyes were closed, its body didn't respond to his touch, but the heartbeat was still there, faint, stubborn. Just tonight, he whispered, more to himself than to the kitten. Just get through tonight, then I'll find someone who knows what they're doing. He sat on the tile floor, back against the tub, and watched. Minutes became hours. The wind rattled the window. Snow tapped against the glass like fingernails. And slowly, so slowly he almost didn't notice at first, the bobcat's breathing deepened. Its paws twitched. A soft, pitiful mewl escaped its throat. He exhaled a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. That's when he heard the soft padding of footsteps in the hallway. Milo appeared in the doorway, tail low, ears forward. The orange tabby moved with the careful curiosity of a cat who knew something in his territory had changed. He didn't hiss, didn't puff up. He just stood there, green eyes fixed on the bundle under the heat lamp, whiskers twitching as he processed the scent. Wild, unfamiliar, wrong. The man watched, ready to intervene if Milo spooked or lunged, but Milo did neither. Instead, he stepped forward, slow, deliberate. He lowered his head and sniffed the bobcat's frozen ears. Then, without hesitation, he began to groom them. Long, deliberate strokes of his tongue across the tiny tufted points. The bobcat didn't wake, didn't flinch, but its breathing steadied further, and Milo didn't stop. The man sat frozen, stunned into silence. He had owned Milo for 6 years. He knew the cat's moods, his quirks, his dislikes. Milo hated the neighbor's terrier. He hissed at the mailman. He once spent an entire afternoon stalking a moth with the intensity of a hunter tracking prey. But this was something else entirely. This was instinct moving in a direction that made no sense. Why would a domestic cat, an animal bred for thousands of years to coexist with humans, to fear the wild approach a predator that should have triggered every alarm in his system? Why would he groom it, protect it, treat it like one of his own? The man didn't have an answer, but as he watched Milo settle beside the bobcat, curling his body protectively around the smaller creature, he felt something shift in the room, something quiet, something that felt for the first time that night like hope. He stayed there on the bathroom floor until dawn broke pale and cold through the window. The bobcat slept. Milo purred softly, a low rumble that seemed to vibrate through both their bodies, and the man realized, with a strange mix of wonder and dread, that this night, this one night he'd promised himself, might be the beginning of something he couldn't yet name. Outside, the wind howled. Inside, two creatures who should never have met lay tangled together in warmth, and somewhere between exhaustion and awe, the man finally let himself believe the bobcat might survive. Morning light filtered through the curtains, soft and pale. The man woke on the couch where he'd collapsed hours earlier, still dressed, neck stiff from the awkward angle. For a moment he forgot, then he remembered. The bobcat, the bathroom, the impossible night. He stood quickly and moved down the hall. What he found stopped him in the doorway. Milo was curled tightly around the bobcat on the towel, his body forming a protective circle. The kitten's breathing was stronger now, its tiny chest rising and falling with steady rhythm. One paw twitched in sleep, stretching toward Milo's face. And Milo was purring, deep and constant,
a sound the man had heard 1,000 times but never like this. He should have separated them, called the rehab center immediately, done the responsible thing. Instead, he made coffee and watched. Over the days that followed, Milo became something the man had no word for: guardian, teacher, parent. Whenever the bobcat cried, a thin, plaintive sound that cut through the quiet house, Milo appeared instantly, meowing loudly as if to say, "I'm here, you're not alone." He brought toys to the bobcat's bed, groomed its ears until they stood clean and pointed, curled around it during every nap. The man tried once to move the bobcat to a separate room, thinking it safer, healthier, more appropriate. Milo scratched at the door for 3 hours straight. He gave up. The bobcat recovered quickly. Within a week, it was eating solid food, wobbling across the floor on unsteady legs, teething on furniture corners with needle-sharp baby teeth. Milo taught it things no wildlife manual could explain: how to head bump in greeting, how to slow blink trust, how to play without breaking skin. But the wild was there too, in the way the bobcat's pupils dilated when a shadow moved, in the precision of its pounces, in how it scaled the curtains one afternoon and perched on the rod, surveying the room like it owned every inch. Milo sat below, unbothered, tail swishing lazily. The man stood in his living room that evening, watching them wrestle gently on the rug, and felt the truth settle over him like weight. This wasn't temporary anymore. Something unusual, something he couldn't explain and didn't dare question, was unfolding in his home. A bond that ignored every rule of nature. A friendship that shouldn't exist, and he had no idea what to do about it. Outside, spring edged closer. Inside, two creatures who belonged to different worlds slept side by side, breathing in rhythm. The man didn't call the rehab center that day, or the next. The bobcat grew faster than anyone expected. Within weeks, its legs lengthened into something lean and powerful. Its paws, once delicate enough to fit in the man's palm, now spread wide with retractable claws that left scratches on the hardwood when it played. The soft mews it had made that first night deepened into chirps and growls, sounds that didn't belong in a house, sounds that echoed something ancient and untamed. But Milo never flinched. Their play fighting intensified. The bobcat would crouch low, ears flat, haunches trembling, then launch itself across the living room in a blur of spotted fur. Milo met it every time, rolling and batting with practiced ease, as if teaching a younger sibling the rules of engagement. But the man could see the difference now. The bobcat's strikes were faster, harder. Instinct was taking over where affection had once led, and yet Milo trusted it completely. The man made the call on a Tuesday morning. The woman on the phone from the wildlife rehab center spoke kindly but firmly. The bobcat was healthy, strong, ready for transitioning back to the wild. She explained the process: soft release, monitored territory, gradual independence, all the things that made sense, all the things he knew were right. But when he hung up, he looked at Milo curled beside the bobcat on the couch, grooming its ears the way he had that first night, and his chest tightened. How do you explain loss to a cat? He built the enclosure himself, large, secure, high platforms for climbing, logs for scratching, even a small water feature. The bobcat explored it with fearless curiosity, stalking grasshoppers through the tall grass, scaling the fence posts with ease. It was thriving. Anyone could see that.
But every evening, as the sun dipped low, the bobcat would return to the glass door that separated the enclosure from the house. It would press its face against the pane, golden eyes scanning the rooms beyond, searching. And inside, Milo would sit on the other side, paw raised against the glass, meowing softly. The man stood between them one night, hand resting on the cold surface, and felt the weight of the choice he had to make. The bobcat was wild. It belonged out there in forests and mountains, hunting under open skies. Keeping it here would be selfish, wrong. But watching Milo cry for the creature he'd saved, the bond he'd formed without question or fear, that felt wrong too. The stronger the bobcat became, the more impossible the answer seemed. Spring was coming, and with it, a decision that would break at least one heart. Maybe both. Spring arrived with the scent of thawed earth and new growth. The bobcat had transformed, sleek, powerful, undeniably wild. Its eyes no longer looked to the man for guidance. They looked outward, toward horizons it was meant to claim. The day came on a morning soft with mist. The wildlife staff arrived quietly, respectfully. They'd done this before. The man walked the enclosure one last time with Milo at his side. The bobcat approached them both, pressing its broad head against Milo's smaller one, then against the man's hand. A long moment passed. No words, just breath and touch and the weight of goodbye. Then, with a final glance back, the bobcat turned and walked into the forest. Strong, steady, free. The silence that followed was crushing. Milo wandered the house for days, crying softly in rooms that suddenly felt too large. He sat by the glass door for hours, waiting for something that wouldn't return. The man found himself doing the same, staring into the trees, wondering if he'd made a terrible mistake. Weeks passed. The ache dulled but never disappeared. Then one evening, reviewing footage from the trail camera he'd mounted near the tree line, the man saw it. There,
Just at the edge of the frame stood the bobcat, bigger now, coat gleaming with health, muscles rippling beneath spotted fur. It wasn't looking at the camera, it was looking at the house. And then, faint on the audio track, he heard it. 2 soft chirps, a response to Milo's cries from the porch. His hands trembled as he rewound the footage, played it again. The bobcat hadn't forgotten. It was listening, watching, still connected to the bond that had saved its life. The next evening, the man opened the door. Milo stepped onto the porch, ears forward, and from the shadows at the forest's edge, the bobcat